We shouldn't teach great books, we should teach a love of reading. Knowing the contents of a few works of literature is a trivial achievement. Being inclined to go on reading is a great achievement. A failure is not always a mistake, it may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. The real mistake is to stop trying. The only geniuses produced by the chaos of society are those who do something about it. Chaos breeds geniuses. It offers a man something to be a genius about. Education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. A person who has been punished is not thereby simply less inclined to behave in a given way. At best, he learns how to avoid punishment. No one asks how to motivate a baby. A baby naturally explores everything it can get at, unless restraining forces have already been at work. And this tendency doesn't die out, it's swiped out. The real question is not whether machines think but whether men do. The mystery which surrounds a thinking machine already surrounds a thinking man. We are only just beginning to understand the power of love because we are just beginning to understand the weakness of force and aggression. What is love except another name for the use of positive reinforcement? Or vice versa? A 4th grade reader may be a 6th grade mathematician. The grade is an administrative device which does violence to the nature of the developmental process. Some of us learn control, more or less by accident. The rest of us go all our lives not even understanding how it is possible, and blaming our failure on being born the wrong way. If freedom is a requisite for human happiness, then all that's necessary is to provide the illusion of freedom. At this very moment, enormous numbers of intelligent men and women of goodwill are trying to build a better world. But problems are born faster than they can be solved. It is a surprising fact that those who object most violently to the manipulation of behavior nevertheless make the most vigorous effort to manipulate minds. A scientist may not be sure of the answer, but he's often sure he can find one. And that's a condition which is clearly not enjoyed by philosophy. Democracy is the spawn of despotism. And like father, like son. Democracy is power and rule. It's not the will of the people, remember, it's the will of the majority.
The majority of people don't want to plan. They want to be free of the responsibility of planning. What they ask for is merely some assurance that they will be decently provided for. The rest is a day-to-day enjoyment of life. That's the explanation for your father divines. People naturally flock to anyone they can trust for the necessities of life. They are the backbone of a community, solid, trustworthy, essential. Why did colleges make their students take examinations, and why did they give grade? What did a grade really mean? When a student studied, did he do anything more than read and think, or was there something special which no one in Walden 2 would know about? Why did the professors lecture to the students? Were the students never expected to do anything except answer questions? Was it true that students were made to read books they were not interested in? In a pre-scientific society, the best the common man can do is pin his faith on a leader and give him his support, trusting in his benevolence against the misuse of the delegated power and in his wisdom to govern justly and make war successfully. Society attacks early, when the individual is helpless. It enslaves him almost before he has tasted freedom. Theologies will tell you how it's done. Theology calls it building a conscience or developing a spirit of selflessness. Psychology calls it the growth of the superego. Considering how long society has been at it, you'd expect a better job. But the campaigns have been badly planned and the victory has never been secured. It is not a question of starting. The start has been made. It's a question of what's to be done from now on. Going out of style isn't a natural process, but a manipulated change which destroys the beauty of last year's dress in order to make it worthless. Not everyone is willing to defend a position of not knowing. There is no virtue in ignorance for its own sake. Promising paradise or threatening hellfire is, we assumed, generally admitted to be unproductive. It is based upon a fundamental fraud which, when discovered, turns the individual against society and nourishes the very thing it tries to stamp out. What Jesus offered in return of loving one's enemies was heaven on earth, better known as peace of mind. In the world at large, we seldom vote for a principle or a given state of affairs. We vote for a man who pretends to believe in that principle or promises to achieve that state. We don't want a man, we want a condition of peace and plenty, or, it may be, war and want, but we must vote for a man. But restraint is the only one sort of control, and absence of restraint isn't freedom. It's not control that's lacking when one feels free, but the objectionable control of force. Men build society and society builds men. Each of us has interests which conflict the interests of everybody else. Everybody else we call society. It's a powerful opponent and it always wins. Oh, here and there an individual prevails for a while and gets what he wants. Sometimes he storms the culture of a society and changes it to his own advantage. But society wins in the long run, for it has the advantage of numbers and of age. Any single historical event is too complex to be adequately known by anyone. It transcends all the intellectual capacities of men. Our practice is to wait until a sufficient number of details have been forgotten. Of course, things seem simpler then. Our memories work that way, we retain the facts which are easiest to think about. The consequences of an act affect the probability of its occurring again. Fame is also won at the expense of others. Even the well-deserved honors of the scientist or man of learning are unfair to many persons of equal achievements who get none. When one man gets a place in the sun, the others are put in a denser shade. From the point of view of the whole group, there's no gain whatsoever, and perhaps a loss. The severest trial of oppression is the constant outrage which one suffers at the thought of the oppressor. What Jesus discovered was how to avoid the inner devastations. His technique was to practice the opposite emotion. A man may not get his freedom or possessions back, but he's less miserable. It's a difficult lesson. Freedom is an illusion, but a valuable one. The world's a poor standard. Any society which is free of hunger and violence looks bright against that background. Your liberals and radicals all want to govern. They want to try it their way to show that people will be happier if the power is wielded in a different way or for different purposes. But how do they know? Have they ever tried it? No, it's merely their guess. The amateur doesn't appreciate the need for experimentation. He wants his experts to know. Nowadays, everybody fancies himself an expert in government and wants to have a say. In a democracy, there is no check against despotism, because the principle of democracy is supposed to be itself a check. But it guarantees only that the majority will not be despotically ruled. Once in a while a new government initiates a program to put power to better use, but its success or failure never really proves anything. In science, experiments are designed, checked, altered, repeated, but not in politics. We have no real cumulative knowledge. History tells us nothing. That's the tragedy of a political reformer. The hero is a device which the historian has taken over from the layman. He uses it because he has no scientific vocabulary or technique for dealing with the real facts of history, the opinions, emotions, attitudes, the wishes, plans, schemes, the habits of men. He can't talk about them, so he talks about heroes. Compare two people, one of whom has been crippled by an accident, the other by an early environmental history which makes him lazy and, when criticized, mean. Both cause great inconvenience to others, but one dies a martyr, the other a scoundrel.